So welcome everybody. Back from lunch, most of you. Hope you're not getting too tired. There's this involuntary soundtrack. Not so easy to compete with the House of the Rising Sun, but I try. This is called Prologue to 300. In February 2009, I came home after a long walk in the snow. I entered the warm apartment and my glasses steamed up. I took off the glasses, grabbed the video camera, actually this one here, set it up, hit the rec button, put the glasses back on and filmed the process of unsteaming. I remember three things from this situation. One, well, I thought this will take about 5 minutes. 2, this takes quite long. 3, from a certain moment on I started feeling a very pleasant and deep calmness. A couple of weeks later, after that situation, I presented 3 performances. Sharpening a pencil, washing hands, licking a very small bicycle. One comment I remember receiving was 5 minutes, that's 300 seconds. I enjoyed it a lot to think of it as a collection of moments. The idea of the collection stayed with me, and the number, 300. Starting points 1 and 2. 1. At the time, it was a topic of many discussions among performance artists how a lot of things got measured and evaluated according to their performance. Like the performance of a certain share in stock market or the performance of the broker trading that share at stock market. Or how performance appeared as name of shavers, running shoes or car tires. I asked myself, being a performance artist, how to cope with the massively increasing use of the word performance for and within a parallelly increasing number of contexts and areas of knowledge, information and life. What did it mean that performance appeared in more and more areas and situations generally referred to as everyday life? In other words, that what commonly is realized as reality? Was life becoming a series of performances without clear definitions? Did that mean that actually everything had a performance, or was a performance? Was that a fact to be welcomed or to be fought? High times to have a specialist answering this question, what is performance? The first simple explanation to it was obviously that it was very different things the word was applied to. However, when taking a closer look, one realizes that despite the differences, there are as well some criteria or characteristics which are shared: interaction, the attempt to describe a relation between specific materials or informations, and various dynamics applied on them within a specific situation. However, I got the impression that through the abundant use of the term, my practices sooner or later would be influenced and perceived as a practice from a rather less important field of what in the broad general perception claimed to produce or be a performance. And I thought, well, I'm doing this stuff now for a while and refer to a certain history of practices. This makes me a specialist, and I should step up and contribute with my perspective in this highly informal process of defining performances. 2. After all I had learned and experienced, performance art is based on process. A performance artist needs continuous practice, a living process. If not, you're fucked. Due to private circumstances, fatherhood, having a family, being at home with after a while 3 children, while my partner earned, continuous practice became something hardly possible to be kept up. I got cut off from process. A decision needed to be made. Following an impulse of self-defense rather than anything else, I decided that whatever happens, 5 minutes a day, have to be mine. 5 minutes beyond doubt, beyond discussion. And being a performance artist, those 5 minutes would be dedicated to performance art practice. 5-minute performances were to be my approach to process my video sketchbook, my personal journal. I thought, process is what I want. Good, I got it. But I need an additional framework. If not, this will become bottomless. It would just go on forever. So I counted how many 5-minute periods make up a day. It's 288 times 5 minutes, which adds up to 24 hours. And I thought, lovely, that's almost 300 again. In 5 minutes, the way I use it are always about 5 minutes, never exactly 300 seconds. Even being the title-giving entity, it is rather the notion of 5 minutes than the precise physical unit of 300 seconds I'm interested in. More precisely, I'm probably interested in the dynamics that grow out of the relation between the precise physical unit on the one hand and the individual perception of time on the other. One way or another, those 300 of my 5-minute performances will add up to 24 hours. That'll do. That's the framework I keep in mind, because this shouldn't go forever, as I said. There needs to be some sort of horizon. Once that day is completed, it's done, and then I see again. So now that I was a performance artist once again, up to create a full day, 24 solid hours of performance art, I wondered what that should be all about. If, as I said earlier, sooner or later everything around us would be turned into performances of kinds, I thought that should be the field I want to direct my critical approach towards. Everything around us, the everyday. And having in mind my personal situation as well as my limited resources regarding time and economic support, everyday seemed to be the very appropriate and key category in terms of format, structure, material I intended to research and employ in the process I was going to dive into. The everyday. Very interesting, but I'll come back to it only later. Before, some thoughts need to be spent on the relation between artistic practice and practice-based research, which 300 involved both to a certain extent from the very beginning. In other words, process versus project. What started as the attempt to get back into a process-based practice is going on now for almost 4 years. Regarding the original plan, I'm about halfway through. In a way, it turned out more processy than I expected it, and this despite the fact that the limiting factor of 24 hours contradicted the idealized idea of a process without beginning nor end already in the very beginning, as I have to admit today. However, what at the beginning looked like a clearly defined task, 300 performances, one every day, that'll take me about a year, maximum 2 if I'm lazy or for whatever other reasons will not manage to do my daily 5-minute thing, turned out to be far more difficult than expected. Process took over, if you want. After the first 5-minute performances, I was so happy that it took me a week to get back to the plan. And soon I started testing different ways to deal with the format. Washing hands with a piece of soap that is gone after 5 minutes, for example, took very long. Preparing a piece of soap with the exactly right size and then learning to wash hands in the very precise way needed took almost a month, having not much more than 5 minutes a day to work on it. But no matter what, until quite recently, it felt like an immense amount of time in front of me, limitless, like a bathtub that you're going to fill with just 1 drop of water per day. Aiming at continuity, a certain rigor is needed to not lose momentum. Apart from that, it's you and the process, one leading to the next, a scratchbook you keep filling. But this changed. Only quite recently, the existence of the formal limits I set up start appearing. Partly to my surprise, I'm suddenly confronted with questions like what I want to have within the collection of pieces and what may not. Having dedicated myself so far to the practice without much judgment of how successful or failed a certain action went, I realized that I am at a point where a couple of groups of works have developed a life of their own within the series, and I wonder what it needs to get them completed. Or should I do the opposite and take them out completely as they become too predominant and blur the character of other pieces around them? I realized how I start wondering if I should create some more dynamic pieces in order to shape up the completed 24 hours, to have some more variety and dynamics to add to this flow of images which I always imagined as a wallpaper which catches from time to time one's attention, however, rather coincidentally. Or should I stretch the process even more into the future? It already became by far bigger than I ever imagined it to be. So far I worried rather how to speed the process up in order to finish it and not carry it with me forever. But recently I caught myself thinking that I might as well allow myself just 10 more pieces a year to include the aging artist as another layer of the work. The work. This is a new word. It seems to introduce a different quality. On the other hand, the questions I described seem to be part of a very normal process within artistic production. However, when thinking about performance art, process-based practice in development and presentation dealing with results seems to be a different cup of tea. Results are a necessary part of the project world, collecting data, fixing a certain state to be evaluated. But that's not really my goal. So what are possible results of a process as I'm bound for? Actually, I can't really say. Definitely not the single video clip. And more I come to the conviction that this rather experimental 24-hour movie, as which I mostly announce it, I feel will only describe a very small part of the research, and that moreover rather poorly. If you'd ask me, a specialist in process analysis and process description that I am. The practice insinuates something else. When doing by far most of the, so far, around 120 pieces, it was me and the camera. I decide an action, I decide a camera angle, a frame, I set up the camera. I do the action, no zooms, no editing. This situation is completely changed when I do pieces publicly. Galleries are similar situations. When I did it for the first couple of times, I worried a lot about the audience. I thought how strange it must be to watch live something being made only for the camera. That the situation is unpolite, and usually I tend to be polite, because as an audience you are not addressed, you are invited to come and be part of a situation, but then you are not, in a way. You observe and witness a situation. Those initial worries change in the course of doing it completely. When doing pieces of 300 publicly these days, the communication with the camera person seems to be a central element. It seems to provide an additional framework which works as a containment for whatever strange or uncommon thing happens then for 5 minutes. There's an outside control halfway between performance and audience. Even more important for me is the difference between what an audience witnesses and what is videoed and later becomes part of the collection. As all the pieces are made for video, I try to create close or unusual frames to emphasize the artificiality and go against the impression that seeing the video is in any way close to having witnessed or an idea of what the videoed situation was like and vice versa. This, I believe, in turn emphasizes and heightens the live character and uniqueness of the situation of an audience attending one of the filming sessions of 300. So I have this collection of video clips which are results of sorts, documenting a certain practice. At the same time, they are, as I call it above, content of a video scratchbook, an almost personal journal. They are the poor description of a specific process and in the common understanding rather unreliable documentary footage of certain actions, as they often show very little of what actually happens. This disqualifies the clips as well as possible notation of what happened, as they provide only a rather vague idea. However, I personally think of them more and more strongly as some sort of fixations of certain steps within a process. So where am I now? Having started a process under apparently false premises, which now is becoming a project, but without results. I might have to bring 300 back to become process again, but process with result, though results that don't mark the end of a process. So whatever it is I'm doing and wherever this will bring me, one thing I learned about is the relation between performance and documentation. Conclusion 1. Documenting might fix a certain state, but by no means should be misunderstood as the final result of a finished process. Process might wear itself out to a certain extent or seem like well done, but in the process-based practice, not more than a temporary conclusion is possible, which as part of the artistic process helps to create the next hypothesis. I want to put up the hypothesis that performance art as process art, as ephemeral art, in opposition to other art forms, employs documenting as a crucial strategy in its various artistic practices. My hypothesis would be that documenting within performance art is more than notation and definitely not production of possible results. Within a process-based art practice, documentation is a necessary tool to take a step back, to gain perspective regarding the artistic process, to evaluate, but only to produce the next hypothesis. I come back to the everyday now, the other field I learned about. everyday stuff. So I started off with testing everyday routines regarding their performance art potential. If there is performance everywhere, I wanted to see if that means that there's at least potentially as well performance art everywhere. But how? Would anything a performance artist does become performance art? Probably not. Washing hands for 5 minutes, shaving 5 minutes, playing with my kids for 5 minutes, deorganizing a bookshelf for 5 minutes, fighting with my partner for 5 minutes, fighting furniture for 5 minutes. Or is it the frame, the 300-second limit, the defined beginning and end that might turn whatever happens in front of this camera, videoing it, into a piece of performance art, plus the fact that I declare it to be a piece of performance art? Quickly I realized that whatever it is I'll be doing before it starts needs to be defined, which means the formal framework needed to be outspoken. A preparation would be like, okay, we are playing now. I want you to think about a game that starts at one point and is over after exactly 5 minutes. Only after this process of definition is realized, it starts. As I try to include many different possible fields in which performance happens, and thus possibly performance art might happen, such as social environments, ethnological research, graphic production, iconographic, artistic, commercial activities, and much more. This means that before doing a piece, a very specific situation needs to be created, in which one single action can be performed continuously for 5 minutes in front of a camera. This means I would not every time I kiss somebody, for example, set up a camera and shoot me kissing people until I have kissing that adds up to 5 minutes. Instead, I would create a situation where I kiss for 5 minutes, or I create a situation where I try for 5 minutes to kiss. So another criteria to enter 300 is that whatever it is not the best of or an edit of various occasions which add up to 300 seconds. What I want to point out is that I'm not intending to create a collection of everyday performances, but a collection of everyday performances that are turned into the activity of a performance artist. Everyday material. Soap, pencils, A4 paper, gestures, situation, everyday stuff, simple things, non-art material. Suddenly I realized that what I was doing was very close to what, according to certain narratives, is described as the roots of performance art. Marginalized groups without access to art institutions, art material, art market, choosing places and materials from their immediate reach to create an artistic practice of their own. This felt great, like really digging in the guts of what performance art is. As I described above, being a father, having no time, having lost contact to institutions and market and colleagues, I felt like being back. But that was just a moment. Then I realized that those beautiful thoughts that brought me so close to original performance art actually share quite a lot with what I went out to approach critically. The abundant use of the word performance. The obvious differences still are there. However, my approach to say, why should I let my current situation stop me from applying the methods and strategies I'm expert in onto everything in my reach, showed some undeniable structural parallels. Everything becomes performance. Everything is performance art when I touch it. It seemed that I went in circles. I didn't know one bit more than when I started out, regarding the world around me turning into an endless series of performances, and as I put it above, if that was a fact to be welcomed or to be fought. That was crisis. But in the middle of crisis, I noticed a very important detail. I got aware that the format itself was, in terms of its everyday quality, the most interesting object of my research and purposes. 5 minutes. A time frame that everybody can afford in almost every situation, quite precise and flexible at the same time. An amount of time that, depending on what one does for 5 minutes, might appear very long, at times annoyingly long, while sometimes it goes by almost unnoticed, or feels like just right. or sometimes doesn't allow to get even started. Conclusion 2. Does that mean that what I do in the 5-minute pieces, which on first glance looks like a simple action, series of movements, is actually a process which could be described as sculpting, the stretching, contracting, enclosing or canning of time, and that the research and maybe even performance art is about the character and qualities of time? In other words, the attempt to deal with time as a physical material and sculpting it like clay, wood, or stone. Two new pieces. Can I switch off this, please?
Two.
Thanks.